Hi all, I have another fascinating game to show you from the TCEC Season 18 Super Final. So Stockfish was playing white against Leela in round 60. The opening e4, knight c6, this is the Nimzovich defense, not very popular nowadays. Knight f3, d6, d4, bishop g4, and this is the end of the book given. Stockfish elects to play c3. Now we have knight f6. Bishop e3, ignoring the attack on this e4 pawn. It is a naughty trap actually. Bishop d7 is played. If knight takes e4 was played instead, then white has d5. The knight moves, opening up this diagonal. And now, can you guess? What does white play? Yep, loose pieces tend to fall off. Queen a4 check. After queen e7 just taking here, so that's a naughty trap. But Leela did see that, so bishop d7 is played actually. Knight bd2, protecting the pawn now. e5, we have h3. a5, and now a4, this does mark that b5 square. E takes, we have knight takes actually. Knight takes d4 instead of c takes, so the knight might be useful to go into b5 or f5 one day. Bishop e7, Leela is keeping the tension, not playing knight takes d4 for a moment. Bishop d3, so these bishops are kind of aesthetically placed here in the centre. Black castles, f4, we have knight takes d4 here, c takes, now knight e8, and here actually queen f3 is played, allowing this pesky check, which is actually played. g3, bishop e7, and now one of the points is castling is a bit disincentivized actually. If white castles, then bishop takes h3, and unless this is some strange gambit, black should be fine here, taking that pawn. So we have king f2, keeping a hold of h3 here. Rook b8. Now, is this a threat or not? b5, does it activate black, or is black kind of passive? A lot of black pieces, you'll note, are on the first rank here, and a couple of bishops on the second. White's pieces seem a bit more aggressive on the third rank. It's a very peculiar position in a way. We have king g2, relieving the rook of duty for protecting the pawn. b5 now, b3, b takes, and now rook b4. So is a4 really a viable target? We have here a move which kind of indicates, you know, it doesn't really matter about losing the pawn for a moment. Rook hb1, rook takes, bishop takes. So black's active pieces have been consumed a bit to win that pawn. The rook's now gone off the board. Queen d7. So for the moment, it's a positional pawn sacrifice by Stockfish. Where's the compensation? It looks actually rather large after d5. This takes away an escape square for the bishop back. So this bishop's left dangling there on a4. And behind it is that pawn to collect. The a5 pawn. We have knight f6. Now here, there is an alignment of the queen and king on this diagonal, and actually this diagonal could be quite dangerous potentially for white. We have bishop d4. If e5 was played, for example, then sometimes there's a tactical shot. Here, knight takes d5 could be pretty annoying, because if queen takes, then bishop c6, pinning the queen to the king. So if, yeah, it doesn't leave too many fantastic options. And if rook takes, then knight takes, and then queen takes. So it's not the right time, it seems, to consider playing e5. So we have bishop d4, but bear this in mind, this possibility. The bishop is no longer a tactical liability en route for this tactic if e5 is played. And it was with check, so bear that in mind. We have now rook b8. And now knight c4, looking at winning a5 and preparing also sometimes e5 again, with a slight difference that sometimes rook takes a4 will be possible. And in fact, indeed it's here after queen e8, which gives sometimes the bishop an escape square back. It looks like a bit of a passive move, this queen e8. But it is getting to be a tricky looking position. We have now e5, and this is very, very awkward. The queen also gave, notably, the knight d7 as well against e5 potentially, but black plays d takes, f takes, and indeed plays knight takes d5 now. And here, again, we see that queen takes will run into bishop c6, but white does now have this important tactic, rook takes a4, and it takes off two minor pieces of black for one rook, which is usually a very good deal. There is an outside pass pawn for black. Queen takes, queen takes. We see that there's an outside pass pawn. But is that enough? Check. And then we have rook d8. And it would seem for a moment the position might be in a dynamic balance. It's very intriguing, this position, with these very central bishops. They cover a lot of squares defensively. They stop the queen from any pesky checks at the moment, but they also look to the attack as well. They're very, very interesting, these bishops. And the knight and queen are also pretty interesting. Well, the queen's being kicked at the moment. It's a very, very interesting position for this central occupation of pieces and one pawn. Very, very interesting. And we have a move which immediately causes a battery and a loosening of black's king safety position, this battery. So how does black want to loosen the position here? h6 is really not plausible because the queen could just go in there and the bishop is causing it to be checkmate there. So we have actually g6 weakening dart squares. And in fact, the pain's not over here after e6. This is a very nasty move, disrupting this very important defensive pawn chain around the king. It's as if white's got a kind of free penalty scenario against the black king here. There's not too many defensive pieces around the king. Black plays now f6. We can see that f5 will just simply not last very long after queen e5. This battery is just lethal. If rook takes, queen takes, that's nothing. That's white's just massively advantaged there materially. And if king f8, queen h8, checkmate, that pawn is covering the f7 escape square. So f5 is out of the question. So we actually have yet another weakening move. It's not tempting to take here either. That looks just absolutely dreadful. So we have a weakening move, f6. You might think, well, maybe black has resources here potentially. But yeah, this pawn chain has been influenced, shaped, reshaped, and it's not exactly in the greatest shape right now after this next move, queen g4, which creates a potentially killer common square, the bishop and queen, focusing on g6. And with that kind of central form pawn, this is a very dangerous scenario here already. It's a very, very tricky position indeed, in fact. Now, Leela chose queen b3. This is an annoying looking move, but it does invite bishop takes g6. Before we get into this, in this position, if f5, the queen just, the damage is done. This diagonal's been opened up. So queen f4 threatens just to go back on that diagonal with a vengeance. And if queen b3, queen e5, and again, this is just a big advantage for white materially if black has to sack the exchange. If instead king g7, then again queen f4 is actually remarkably strong here, threatening c7, believe it or not. This is more than a technicality because here it's a key tempo gain for g4. If the rook has to protect c7, then g4 for g5. And if c5, bishop b2, held by the knight, still keeps the queen out of all key squares. These bishops still control that queen. And if queen b3, g5, this is just as black king gets mated on the diagonal, actually. And if you look at now bishop c5, trying to do something maybe with these bishops. The thing is, bishop takes, rook takes, e7. There's no real perpetual checks here. The queen covers d1. Check, king f2, queen c2, queen e2, and there's a running out of checks here. And that pawn's threatening to queen. So these are very disastrous scenarios. So it's a difficult position. Queen b3 is played. Now here, something really remarkable happened actually. Bishop takes g6. Now, Stockfish is mega excited by this game. And I'll describe this as a mega boom because now, believe it or not, Stockfish felt the position was plus 24 in its favour. And Leela just didn't see any problem with this position, just gave it as 0.13 to white. So that's a serious mismatch of evaluation. A mega mismatch and a mega boom from the Stockfish perspective. We have h takes g being played. On rook takes d4, simply here bishop f7 is a killer double check, and we know double checks cause the king to have to move, and here it's going to be mate, either king h8 or king f8, queen g8 is mate. So hg, we have queen takes, king h8. Now check here, and now Stockfish feels this is plus 153.69. And Leela thinks it's 0.15. This is an even greater mismatch of evaluation. And you know, you get the idea that you don't really want to mess with Stockfish when you have bad king safety. It's a truly horrific engine for how deep, you know, its calculations can go. So it's really convinced it's all over here. So why? I mean, it really needs to be shown to us mere mortals. King g7, check. And now there's a key move being played here, believe it or not. I wonder if you can guess. Because it looks as a little bit like fragile, like the bishop's interrupting d1. There's going to be a wealth of checks. This wealth of checks is not materializing though, because knight e3. It's like a bit of a cold shower move. Leela all of a sudden gets a bit twitchy here and goes to 0.38 for white after this move. There's a lot of checks to take the bishop with check, and the knight sometimes coming to f5 now. And this pawn could be a key asset. If this bishop's removed, it's the blockading piece for that pawn. We have actually queen d3 being played. So not daring to take that bishop because of these potential, you know, checks taking the bishop. We have now, though, bishop takes f6, bishop takes, queen takes. And now Leela's crept up to 0.42. Stockfish is at 153.85 for white. King h7, check, king h8. And now queen h4 check. And this causes another little twitch for Leela, going up to 0.98 for white. Not yet a pawn's worth. And Stockfish at 153.86. King g7. We have check, king h7. And now e7. And this is starting to... I'm having a vision of the classic Botvinnik against Capablanca game, where Botvinnik played bishop a3. And it led to a remarkably deep, you know, series of checks and stuff from Botvinnik. It feels almost a little bit like the engine equivalent of that game now. After knight d5, there are vicious threats emerging here, and that is a very dangerous passed pawn. White is the exchange down here technically for one pawn, but the king's safety is just, the king is bare. We have king h8, and Stockfish Leela updates to 1.50 for white, so some serious issue. But where is it? Believe it or not, this position is really stable now, in a way. And white just calmly plays g4. These pawns are really dangerous, but isn't this pawn a concern? Or has all this been calculated? Has it really been calculated, this scenario of this or this pawn versus that pawn? We have c6. The thing is here, if a4, then check, and queen takes e8, is a big advantage for white, because these checks kind of run out after here. King e3, white's got a big advantage there. So because there's always, you know, queen f8 and queening as a big threat. So a4 is actually not plausible here. So we have this move c6 instead. This makes things slightly different. The knight actually is retreating here, because on queen h5 check, there's actually a possibility for black to take here on d5 with the pawn and secure in this position a perpetual check scenario. There's no queen f8 there, and there's a perpetual check scenario which is equal. So knight e3 avoids all that though in this position. And we have king h7, and now again a bit more twitchy, 1.79 for white from a Leela perspective. Knight f5. So threatening queen g7 mating. We have check, 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 and now queen f7 parrying queen g7. And Leela is back here to 0.53, maybe a little bit confident that the worst is over. Stockfish is at 154.01, nothing's really changed. Queen h6 check, and now taking off this key c6 pawn. Taking time out and threatening now knight h6 check. We have king h8, but now queen h6 check, and believe it or not now, so Leela now thinks it's over at nearly 2.49 for white, because now king g5, and there's a big reveal here about this position, that it's actually, it seems to be this pawn versus this pawn. But the thing is, this pawn can help mate the black king en route. We have queen takes. If a4, queen f6, and then knight h6 will pick up the queen, and that's over. So queen takes h6 is played, king takes, and you can see that this has been so finely, deeply calculated that we're talking about moving the pawn up here, moving the king for knight h6 as the major threat. So we have a4, g5, and black gets out of the way of this impending checkmate. It really doesn't work very well for black if black continued to push here, 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 g7, here, queen, but alas, knight h6 is checkmate. Clockwork. Okay, so we have actually instead king g8, trying to change a little bit the course of events. G6, a3, g7, and now the point is king f7, trying to create a variation on that. If a2, again, we're back in that mainline variation, you know, king g6, and then checkmate. So king f7, but now after knight d6 check, it's still working very well for white. After king f6, knight takes e8 check, king f7, it's all over because white plays g8. Yeah, this is all working as well. It's over. After king takes, the knight's just going to move, and then the queen for white. So white's landed first to do the queening. Yep. It's a remarkable mismatch of evaluations in this game. A mega boom. And Leela didn't really know what was going on in this scenario. It's just unbelievable calculation depth from Stockfish expressed in this game. Yeah, it's a remarkable game, and I would like to cover all the decisive games. The weather's been a bit hot, but it's been. I'm hoping it's going to be a bit cooler this week. So some really fascinating games to watch at TCEC-chess.com, and this was really one of them for me. It shows the horror of Stockfish's depth of calculations, and it seems to have improved in closed positions as well. So it's doing well in the French defences this time. So the tension of the new era of are the neural networks going to dominate? I think Stockfish is giving the neural networks a good run for their money or their training. I think a few more million games of training are definitely needed, because at the moment in the match, the score is actually in Stockfish's favour as of 29th of June, 2020 by about 4 points at the moment, so it's a big lead. And this was one of those wins from Stockfish, which is just absolutely stunning, showing Stockfish's gigantic calculation capabilities. Amazing stuff. Out of this world, some of these games. I hope you'll agree. I just think they're absolutely fascinating. If you want to join me for a game, kingscrusher.tv or bit.ly/chessworld. If you register at chessworld, I'll be able to invite you for a game soon after. I have a suave chat forum at kingscrusher.tv/discord if you want to give game suggestions. One day I'll be able to maybe do a video of them. And those playlists, bit.ly/Leela chess or bit.ly/Stockfish chess. Check those out. Okay. Comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes, all appreciated, especially with that notification bell. Okay. Thanks very much.